Okay, so I just made a big video about bluff to value ratios. And that's kind of like if you're in the driver's seat of you're the one betting, you're the one driving the action. How frequently should you bluff depending on how many hands you intend to value bet, right? So this is what to do if you're in the receiving end. If you have a hand that you are check calling with, when do you keep check calling and when do you wave the white flag and fold, right? So in this situation, let's say I've got King 10 suited, right? So on the flop here, I have a pretty awesome hand. I have top pair with a solid kicker and a flush draw, right? So let's say the button bets, I don't know, like roughly full size pot. I'm going to call. Okay, go to the turn. He bets again. I call again. Get to the river. Okay, we got the jack. He bets. What do I do? Okay, how do I figure out what percentage of the time I need to call? Well, let's say that there's 10 bucks in the pot. He risks 10 bucks. Okay. So if I fold 100% of the time, my opponent is just going to start bluffing all the time, right? They're just going to start playing bad hands and just betting them anyways because they know I'm going to fold. If I call 100% of the time, well, my opponent is going to only bet when they have a good hand and then just extract value from me that way, right? So I need to call some of the time and I need to fold some of the time. Let's forget about raising at the moment. Raising is appropriate to do sometimes, but for now, let's just say I am going to call or fold, right? So what percent of the time do I need to call in order to make sure that my opponent doesn't have an edge on me? Well, what's he risking, right? So previous calculation was like, okay, I'm the other guy here, and wondering what your opponent is risking, by calling versus folding. Excuse me, what your opponent, stands to gain if they win versus what they would lose if they call and their hand sucks. So this is the situation. Let's say that my opponent is bluffing. Let's say they got that 6-7 on the flop. They bluffed, right? Triple barrel bluff. Okay. Of course, I don't know that, right? But if they're bluffing and they're risking, so right now what they're doing is they're risking $10, right? If I call them and my hand's better, then they're going to lose $10. If they bluff and then I fold, then they're going to win $10, right? So risking 10 to win 10. Okay. So this thing's blurry. There we go. So what percentage of the time, what chunk of the time do I need to call in order to deny them the ability to just bluff endlessly? Well, I would think that I would have to call half the time, right? Because from their perspective, okay, half the time they're going to gain $10, and the other half the time they're going to lose $10. So then you're going to end up with 5 minus 5, 0, right? If I call 3/4 of the time, they only win when I fold, right? Because they're bluffing. If I call 3/4 of the time, and 10/4 minus 30/4, 20/4 is -5. It's not in their best interest to bluff, so they're not going to do it, right? If they know that I call way too much, they're not going to bluff. They're only going to value bet, and then I'm just going to be paying them off. Other way around, I'm not going to do the math, but if I fold too much, they're going to bluff a lot, right? So you want to call with minimum defense frequency. That's what this calculation is called. And it's just basically the way to figure out minimum defense frequency is like you take their bet and then you divide it by the total amount in the pot, right? So 10 divided by 20 is half. So you need to call half the time. I didn't really show the general formula for the bluff to value ratio. So from the other perspective over here, the bluff to value ratio calculation is, okay, the pot's currently 10. I'm going to bet 10, right? So now the pot is 20, right? Trying to think how I should say what the calculation is. If they call, the pot will be 30. So my bet was 10, and the total pot, should the opponent call, will be 30. So it's going to be 10 divided by 30, so 1/3. So 1/3 of my hand should be bluffs in this situation, right? So if both players are playing correctly in that situation, where This guy bets 10. Okay. If he's playing correctly, 1/3 of the time he should be bluffing. And if I'm playing correctly over here, I should only call half the time. And that would be a situation in which neither player has an edge. That is how a computer would play this hand. Now, turning that into action can be kind of difficult, right? And you kind of have to keep track of, okay, what hands could I have in this situation? And, you know, like what hands would I get to the spot with? A hypothetical is, let's say in this situation, the only hands I'd have left after the turn would be, let's say on the flop I called with any pair, a king, an 8, or a 5, and some ace highs. You know, my tier 1, 2, 3, 4 hands, right? Because let's say on the flop, there was, I don't know, there was $3 in, and my opponent decided to bet 3. Okay, so 3 into 3, I need to call half the time. Okay, if you remember back to my hand tiers video, there's 8 tiers of hands, right? So these aren't here yet. Okay, tier 1 is a king, tier 2 is an 8, tier 3 is a 5, tier 4 is an ace, tier 5 is a queen, tier 6 is a jack, tier 7 is a 10, and tier 8 is a 9, okay? And yeah, there are hands lower than that, but they're rare, and actually in this case, most of them are straight draws, right? Like 7-6 is a straight draw, 7-4 is a straight draw, 6-4 is a straight draw. So most of the hands fall into one of those tiers. Okay, so if I have 8 tiers in my range and I need to fold half my hands, I'm going to get rid of tiers 5 through 8. So I'm going to call with a king, an 8, or a 5, or possibly ace high, right? That's just to give you a general idea of like how many hands, but you don't have to call with all ace highs. Like I'm definitely not folding with a flush draw here, right? Like if I have queen, jack of diamonds, I'm not going to fold because, oh, well, the queen's not high enough. I might even raise, right? So maybe like if I have ace of diamonds, 10 of clubs or something, that's a backdoor flush draw in this situation. So I might call with that, you know? Maybe if I have the queen of diamonds and something else, I'm going to call with that, you know? But the general idea is you want to have about half the hands in your range you're going to call with, right? Okay, so let's say I call, because remember in this situation, I have a really good hand here, right? Okay, we go to the turn, total brick, changes nothing, right? And let's say he fires again, and this time he fires another like almost full pot bet. Let's say he bets $10 here, right? Okay, so I need to fold another almost half of my range, right? Okay, so my ace highs, unless they're flush draws, that's out of here, right? Probably my 5s, most of them, I think I'm going to get rid of. Yeah, so right now I'm calling with a king or an 8, and I'm still sticking around if I have a flush draw. Once again, though, if I had a flush draw, I probably would have check raised, right, on the flop. But anyway, so we go to the river. Yeah, I called. So now we've got like $30, $32 in there. Okay, the river's a jack. So remember, what hands are in my range at this point? A king is in my range, and 8 is in my range. And he fires again. That's $30. So it's going to basically be all in. Let's just say he goes all in. Okay, what am I calling with? Well, I need to fold out another half of my range, right? Okay, well, I just said the only hands I have are kings and 8s. So I'm going to fold my 8s. If I have an 8 here, I fold. And if I have a flush draw here, I fold. I miss the flush draw, right? But I am going to call down with top pair, right? So I'll call. And if he has the hand, then he's got me beat. Good job on him. But I still played the hand correctly, right? As a general rule, if you're facing somebody who's making like 75 to 100% pot bets, on the flop, you're going to call with all pairs, some ace highs, king highs, etc. Definitely, like with a flush draw or a straight draw, you're not folding. You just might end up raising in that situation. But I like ace high with a backdoor flush draw, right? So like going back to this on this flop, if I had like ace 7 of spades, right? And then maybe another spade comes off on the turn, I'm definitely not going anywhere. If I have that, if I have queen 9 of spades, right? I'm probably going to call, right? So all the pairs on the flop you want to call, and then some of the high hands with maybe a backdoor flush draw, I like to call with those. You get to the turn and he fires another one. Once again, this is another full pot or 75% pot size bet. Okay, now I'm calling with second pair or better. Right? So once we get to the turn and he fires again, I'm getting rid of my 5s. I shouldn't even be here with a 3. Like, well, what if you pair the 3? Well, why did you get to this point in the first place? Unless you had ace 3, right? You had ace 3 of spades, you called, and then you bank a 3 on the turn. And he fires again. I'm still probably folding, but you shouldn't have just a pair of 3s most of the time in that situation. On the river, once again, this is 3 straight barrels. This is not if he checks. On the river, I'm calling with top pair. And I am willing to call with a weak kicker. Because, right, as we've established, if you're always folding, they're going to bluff, right? So even if I had king deuce suited and he fired 3 barrels at me like that, I'm still probably going to call. Because he could be bluffing. Or he could be overvaluing a weak hand. So yeah, that's my general outline. If he misses a bet, though, if the opponent misses a bet, this is why it's important to kind of keep track of where you're at in the hand, roughly speaking. Is that even? All right. So let's say he bet the $1.50, pre. Okay. I guess we should have the 25 cents in from this guy too, shouldn't we? All right. And the flop came out and he bet $3. Okay. And I called. All right. And then we went to the turn and for some reason he checked. Okay. Well, I'm acting first. So I checked, he checked back. That's kind of odd. Like, why did he check if a 3 came out? Like, that should be pretty harmless. It seems to me like he's bluffing, right? Okay. Let's say we go to the river. Maybe, honestly, in this situation, I might actually start value betting. I might, go, okay, this dude obviously doesn't have anything, so I'm going to bet here. But let's say I didn't. And then he does bet on the river, right? Okay. Well, I can call down a lot lighter than top pair, right? Because he missed that second bet. So, right? So remember, on the flop, I said, okay, I'm in here with a pair, and I'm in here with some ace high, maybe queen high stuff if there's a backdoor flush draw or a flush draw. And then the turn goes through, so I'm all the way at the river, and some of the hands in my range are still queen high. Some of the hands in my range are ace high. Some of the hands in my range are a pair of 5s. Okay, so now he makes another roughly full pot size bet. Okay, now I'm folding out half my range, but my range is a lot weaker now. So I can call down with maybe my 8s. If I bink a jack on the river, I'm probably calling with that, right? But, so like, yeah, if I had 8-7 of clubs or something, I'll probably go ahead and call here, right? So I'm kind of using the range I would normally call with on the turn, right? You kind of scoot back. And then another hypothetical, if he just totally checks down to the river and then he fires a bet, yeah, I'll probably call with, I don't know, probably some of the top 4 pairs on the board. A little bit of a judgment call there. What I call with a pair of 3s if I faced a bet on the river. I don't know, maybe not. Oh yeah, and last thing to say about minimum defense frequency is just like the bluff to value ratio, it depends on the size of the bet, right? So I was kind of showing you what to do if the other guy bets big. If the other guy bets small, right, going back to the flop, and let's see, he said $1.50 out there, and he bets $1. This is a third pot size bet. So I should be calling with, let me think this through. It's, he's risking 1 to win 3. So I need to call with I need to only fold a quarter of my range, right? So remember the 8 tiers. Okay. So I'm only going to fold out my, tier 7 and tier 8 hands. So I'm calling every single pair, king 8-5, ace high, queen high, jack high. and anything goofy with a backdoor or any flush draw, something like that. In fact, if somebody bets a third pot or less, it can be easy just to call with whatever you have. Like, don't even worry about it. And the only question you should have in your mind is, am I going to call or check raise here, right? Because just a small bet, you know, is kind of weak, right? It's not signaling that you have a great hand. So you can try to figure out the exact bottom quarter of your range, or you can just call 100% of the time and go to the turn and figure out what to do there. But yeah, you should be responsive to the size of the bet. You should be responsive to how many times the other guy bets. In doing this, you'll prevent yourself from losing a ton of money, right? You know, if I have a pair of eights in this situation, I face a bet on the turn, on the flop, face a bet on the turn, I call that, face a bet on the river, I fold. And yeah, I lost some money, but I didn't lose my whole stack, right? You keep it proportionate to how good your cards are. That's the benefit of minimum defense frequency.